So Brett, out of the 8 or so releases so far in Assembly Records, if you had to pick just one, what would that be and why?
Cool, that's a tough question. I'm not sure I'm allowed to have favourites, to be honest. I think I'd probably get myself into trouble if I was to single out any one release. I've been really pleased with all of them generally. Certainly our first release was a big one, a very important one. I think as the first outing for any new label, it was going to be quite daunting. And I remember sending out the promos for Jordan Peake's Gooseneck EP. With both fingers crossed, not really knowing what to expect. But thankfully, luckily, in the space of a few hours, we started to receive some really great feedback. And a few days down the line, we got news that Tim Green had featured one of the tracks on his Radio 1 Essential mix, which was a huge boost for us, a huge boost for the label, and I think a big boost for Jordan as well. Some of the more recent releases have appealed to my own musical taste slightly more. Rob Small's remix of More Berlin in particular. In fact, that whole Alicia EP was really strong. We've also just signed a new guy called Danny Hartley. Danny's a young lad from Leeds who sent me a handful of tracks a few months ago, which are all fantastic, from which we've selected 2 to be our 10th release. And the 10th release will also coincide with our first birthday, so again that's another milestone, another big release. I was really impressed with Danny, really impressed with his music, and I think he's got a really good future ahead of him.
What can we expect from Assembly Records in the future as far as releases, and also planning any parties in the future?
It's going to be business as usual really. I'm hoping to really step things up a gear this year. I've been really busy myself over the last few months with moving house and things like that, but I'm confident now that we've got a solid stable of artists behind us, and a few releases under our belts, that we can really take it to the next level. I'm looking into releasing on vinyl, which is sort of negotiating with various distributors at the moment to do that, and I think that's probably going to be the next step. I don't want to be just another sort of digital label. I think releasing on vinyl gives you that extra little bit of kudos, and I think as the vinyl seems to be coming back into fashion again all of a sudden, which is good. That's definitely something I'd like to do. I don't want to be regarded as one of these sort of here today, gone tomorrow digital labels, because we're certainly not. As I mentioned earlier, we're just coming up to our first birthday. We've got Danny Hartley's Blade Naught EP, which is due out, which features a remix by Niels Noah, which is very exciting. And I think probably the release after that, we're going to do a kind of a remix compilation. We select a handful of tracks from the year, and we kind of do a remix swap within the artist stable, and just see what comes out. It's a bit of fun really, and we'll probably get a few guest remixes in to do that as well. We're already talking to a few people about that, but I can't really commit to any names at this point. In terms of parties, it's certainly something that there's a lot of talk about, and we should do. It's long overdue really. We didn't even have a launch party as such, just because we were so busy getting the actual label and the music up together. I really should sort of start to look into that really. It's just a case of finding enough hours in the day at the moment. It's just crazy. But yeah, there's definitely a label party on the cards.
What inspired you to start DJing and then later on producing music?
It's quite an interesting story really. I grew up in quite a musical household. My sister was probably quite a big influence on me when I was a kid, especially in the 80s. I remember her and her friends listening to Madonna and Michael Jackson and things like that, and also my mum had a huge record collection, a lot of Motown, a lot of 60s stuff like the Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Kinks, the Moody Blues, a lot of kind of 70s soul and funk as well. And we used to have this record player in the front room. It was like a huge piece of furniture, and I remember just spending hours sat in front of that, just trawling through mum's records. So I guess I was kind of switched on to music from quite an early age. But in terms of DJing, I suppose one of my earliest memories was being at a school disco, and this same guy used to come and DJ every year at our sort of Christmas discos. And I was kind of fascinated by it. I just like the idea of having all these records, like a huge record collection, and being able to play it really loud through really big speakers. And I think that was the initial attraction for me. But then as I started high school, I started to get into a lot of kind of grunge and rock and stuff like that. And I played the drums in a couple of bands, So I think it kind of subsided slightly, and it wasn't until sort of the mid to late 90s when could probably just sneak my way into a nightclub that I was getting exposed to house music, and I slowly kind of really started to get into it. And I think having played in a couple of bands, I'd already got the bug for performing to a crowd, and I was fascinated with DJing and sort of beat matching, and I found it quite a challenge to learn to do it, and also really addictive. So I started to collect records. I got my first set of turntables, started to do some mixtapes. They started doing the rounds and ended up in the hands of some local promoters who then booked me for some gigs. That carried on for a couple of years. I moved to Southampton. I started playing quite a lot in Southampton, which led to work kind of up and down the south coast. And then I finally moved to London. And began working in London and elsewhere.
What's your all-time favourite mix compilation?
All-time favourite mix compilation? I'd have to say the first Northern Exposure album, Sasha and Digweed. Back when Sasha and Digweed were doing their epic house thing, really long intros, big breakdowns, 11 or 12 minute long tracks, real kind of journey stuff. It was actually a good friend of mine that put me onto the CD. I remember listening to it around his house, just loving it. It was so different to anything I'd heard before. Certainly very different to the music I was playing. I think I was probably playing some quite heavy house music at the time, and I think it inspired me really. It sort of opened my eyes to a completely different sort of genre of house music, and it certainly affected the music I was buying. I think I went down a far more sort of progressive route, and I still love the album today actually. I mean, there's one track on there by Drum Club, I think it's Sound System by Drum Club, and it's the Underworld remix, which is probably one of my all-time favourite tracks. I mean, I absolutely love it.
When producing music, what software and hardware do you use?
Software, I use Logic. I've used Logic for quite a few years now. I do all my arrangements, all my final mixes in Logic. I do use Ableton. I quite often have it sort of rewired into Logic. Quite often it depends on the project I'm working on. If I'm working on a remix and I'm working from other people's parts, then I will use Ableton initially. I do sort of need to brush up on my Ableton skills a little bit. I tend to start in Ableton, get that initial groove going, start chopping things up, rearranging things, but then the actual final arrangement and the EQing and stuff I'll do in Logic. But that's purely because that's what I'm more comfortable working in. In terms of gear, I have a sort of a basic setup at home. It consists of like a couple of Macs, a couple of screens, some monitors, some mics, sound card and a vocal compressor. I've just kind of got the bare minimum what I need to work on at home. I'll normally start working on a track or a project at home, and then I'll take it into a studio. There's a studio I use in London, and there's another studio down in Basingstoke where I work on stuff. A lot of the stuff, like I say, I do in the box. I use a lot of soft synths and stuff. But if I feel that it's lacking that kind of analog sort of warmth, I've been sending a lot of stuff to Rob Small, who's been doing a lot of finalising and mastering work for me. Rob's actually done a remix for the label, and he's a great producer, but he's also a bit of a mastering guru. And he's been doing a lot of work for me, just to kind of inject a bit of warmth that might be missing from some of my tracks.